Okay, welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. And Gary, it sounds like I have a different co-host today. You have a little frog in the throat.
I just took a drink of water trying to get rid of the frog. This has really been a bad weekend for me. You know, we usually talk about each other's weekends. Mine, as you've already been told.
I can tell.
It kicked my tail. Whatever this is. Well, I have, sinusitis and bronchitis, but I'm on the tail end of it.
And all kinds of meds. So don't worry, listeners. He has been on antibiotics. I'm safe here. Todd's safe here.
I have 1 day left, so I'm not contagious. But man, would you feel more comfortable if we put like a saran wrap wall between us or something?
I'll trust you. I'll trust your doc.
Oh, boy.
If they say you can be at work, we're good.
I'm so
sorry.
And
we have a lot of good stuff to talk about today.
We do. We're talking about adoption. Magnificent, way to raise a family. And but there's scams out there. There's scams for everything.
Well, it's a very emotional process.
Yeah.
Even the adoptions that end in a really beautiful family, it's emotionally grueling in some cases. So scammers know that. We talk about scammers all the time, and my goodness, they just jump in and latch onto something that is really emotional. Because they know they can pull at people's heartstrings.
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's an emotional topic, and that's the vulnerability for victims out there, because the scammers, like you said, they know that, and they know right when to hit you. And
well, there's nothing more precious than our families, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to be talking to Nicole Witt. She is the executive director of the adoption consultancy and the host of Adopting the Podcast. How are you today, Nicole?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Let me just apologize for my voice. I normally don't sound like a grizzly bear. But today, I'm on the tail end of it, like I said, so we're going to manage to get through this. So you're in Tampa, Florida. How is it down there?
It's hot, but it's you guys know all about that. But no, it's great. I absolutely love living over here.
Yeah, the humidity down there is just like, it just swallows you, doesn't it?
Yeah, but 9 months out of the year, it's just heaven. So
yeah,
so we love it.
I always love chatting with other podcast hosts because I want to see, how are we doing comparatively? When you host your own podcast, we got to kind of compare notes and learn from each other. So it's always fun to have another fellow podcast host join us as our guest.
Absolutely.
How are we doing so far, Nicole? Are we okay?
Excellent. 5 stars.
Thank you.
Minus my voice.
Yeah, right?
Minus my voice. Hey, so tell us, Nicole, about scammers out there. I think adoption, it's a beautiful thing, but it's something that you don't really think about when it comes to scams. But It happens, though. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen nearly as often as people fear. I think that's the most important point. The vast majority of planned adoptions do go through. The ones that don't go through, it is almost always because the birth mom has an honest change of heart. So this is a very small number that we're talking about, which I think is really important. But when it does happen, of course, it's devastating. And it has been on the rise. I think since COVID, since everything kind of went digital, it's much easier for scammers to kind of hide behind a computer, right, than when they have to meet with people in person. So I feel like that has contributed to an increase in adoption scams.
One of the scams that you have talked about on your own podcast is the phantom birth mother scam. Walk me through what that actually is. It sounds like I'm assuming it's exactly what it sounds like. This person doesn't exist. But how does it actually work?
Yeah, so this can be sort of one of two things, whether you're talking about international adoption or domestic adoption. So with so you're right, there's no baby that exists, there's no birth mom that exists, and this is kind of the type that's been on the rise since pandemic and everybody being able to do things more digitally. So with international, you might get these cases where somebody's like, oh, I have this child, I need to get them to the US immediately for adoption, I need money for airfare or a visa or whatever. It amazes me that people still fall for that. But again, people are so emotionally invested and they want so much for it to be true that they do. Those cases are are never real. The harder ones to suss out, and again, experienced adoption professionals can, but people who are brand new to it and doing it the first time, often can't, is with domestic adoption. And that's when, this person is sending ultrasound pictures, sending doctor reports, claiming to be pregnant, claiming to have an adoption plan. And those are all completely fake documents, things that they've pulled off the internet. And there's no real situation there. And they're just, it's just a pure scam.
And they're just trying to get money.
Usually it's money. So we are going to talk about some of the other kinds of adoption. There's some emotional scams as well, but usually it is for money.
How does the scammer target the victim? I mean, it seems like a very small pool available. So how does that happen?
Well, so there's certainly people who work only sort of in person or live with adoption agencies and attorneys. But again, these days, there are more and more people who put their information out on the internet to try to make a match with an expectant mom that way. And that can be very successful. There are lots of people who adopt totally successfully that way. But it's these scammers that come across those advertisements or the outreach saying, hey, we're looking for somebody who's interested in placing their baby. And it's very easy for them to target them.
Wow.
It seems like the most heartless of all. We've covered a lot of scams, and this one just seems like the most particularly heartless.
Yeah.
I can't
Well,
fathom.
they all are, but this is like at the top of the heartless list.
Well, I can't fathom falling in love with what I think is going to be my child.
Right.
And then that is a figment of somebody's imagination.
So
right, you're right. Other scams tend to be purely financial. This has so many other layers to it. People who've struggled for years and years to have a family. It's tragic. So,
correct me if I'm wrong. Are there around 120,000 adoptions a year here in the U.S. and how many of those do you think, or how many times are people scammed out of those?
Well, so that is the ballpark number, but that includes foster adoption, that includes kinship adoption. So there actually surprisingly aren't like real hard and fast numbers in terms of number of private domestic adoptions because it's all state done and all the states don't necessarily talk to each other. So it's for private domestic adoption of newborns, you may be talking about more like 30, 40,000, something like that. I mean, like I said, it's a very small number that are actual scams. And people are working with a reputable, experienced team of adoption professionals. Again, these are easy to kind of see and to know what's happening if you're familiar with it. So I think it's that very, very small percentage, again, of people who are brand new to it, who are online, and who just so much want this to be real that they're ignoring the warning signs. Because I feel like, every time there's an interview or a conversation with a family who's been through this, afterwards they say, there were some of those red flags. Like I should have trusted my gut on that.
Spell it out. What are some of those red flags that are super common that people did tell you about noticing after the fact?
Yeah. So some of it is, well, one of the kind of key factors is if she's pregnant with twins, right? Not obviously there are actual twin adoptions that go through, but again, people are so emotionally, anxious to build their family. They'd obviously rather go through this process just once. So everybody who's adopting practically loves the idea of adopting twins. And that's very, very appealing. So the scammers know that. So often they say, oh, I'm pregnant with twins, right? So if that happens, it's, it could be a real case, but it definitely deserves digging into it further. Then there is, when she chooses a family right away, like, oh, I saw your profile online and you are the family, versus let's have some conversations. Let's see if there's a connection here. Let me make sure that you are truly the family I envision raising my baby, right? That's somebody who's serious, right? But somebody who's just like, oh, I saw you online, let's go. That's a bit of a concern.
Absolutely.
So we talked about the phantom mom and how that works. What are some other scams out there? Are there scams involving, like, I'm an attorney and I'm going to help you and guide you through the adoption process, pay me money and we'll work this out? Is that something that happens out there?
Fortunately not. I mean, I'm sure it has at some point, but theoretically, it could be, but that's not really something that we hear about. And I think that is one area where adoptive parents do their research. They make sure that they're working with a reputable attorney. There's an organization for adoption attorneys that most people who start digging into adoption realize they should check if their attorney is a member of that. So that's not really a concern. There are some other financial scams that we can talk about, but I think one of the most sort of insidious ones, which I had briefly mentioned, is kind of this emotional scam. And that's when maybe she is pregnant, but she has no intention of placing. She's not asking for money, right? So a lot of times the adoptive parents are like, well, this can't be a scam because she's not asking for money, right? But it's really so sad if you think about it, because a lot of times it's these young women who've never been the center of the attention. They've never had people reaching out, checking in with them, wanting to make sure they're okay, that they have what they need. And that just becomes addictive to them. They feed off of that. And it's not at all about the money. They just want that attention. And it's so hard for adoptive parents to believe that could be happening, that's often one that they don't realize is a scam.
So when you think about a scam, you think about some kind of financial exploitation, but in that category of scams, it's like emotional exploitation, right? I mean, they're scamming victims for just emotional support. Yeah.
And like I said, it happens, and like people just don't expect it. They don't really understand it. So they just think, well, that can't be a scam. This poor young woman, if we just, give her this attention or whatever, everything will be fine. Because who would do that, right? But it really does happen.
And then these adoptive parents don't find out until the baby shows up.
Right. Or, what often happens in those kinds of situations is that expectant mom, she may be working with an agency, she may not, she may have connected with the family online, but basically when she goes into labor, she just doesn't tell anybody. They just never hear from her again.
What about women who are pregnant and they're I don't know, maybe they have an agreement written or verbal that they're going to adopt the baby out. Maybe they get money to begin with and then they back out. Is that a common scenario?
Yeah, so that's kind of the traditional scam. And it can be a scam. It can, like I mentioned up front, it could be an honest change of heart, and that happens too, because from a legal perspective, the money that the adoptive parents pay for her pregnancy-related expenses has to be considered a gift. Otherwise, you get into like baby buying and things like that. So there really is very little recourse for that money. So if once she has the baby, she chooses to parent, with few exceptions, that money for those expenses is usually lost. Again, that could be a scam. It could be an honest change of heart, but from a financial perspective, it's kind of the same result. From an emotional perspective, I feel like it's different. It's much worse if you realize you were the victim of a scam.
Kind of going into the weeds here, but with the written contract, if the woman decides, I just really want to keep this baby, where does that go? Does that go into the courts then, or kind of what happens? We're kind of getting off topic here, but
right. That's okay. So usually, that's part of the risk that adoptive parents take, and they understand that, so they know that if she chooses to parent, maybe this amount of money is lost, this amount is refunded or rolled over. It all depends on the particular agency's policy. But, they just kind of go and try to find another match. If there is indication that it was fraudulent, then the attorneys can sue the birth mom and try to get that money back. The reality of it is she doesn't have it. And then what happens is what the baby gets put into foster care. It's not a good outcome.
It's a disaster.
That's terrible.
Most people just don't pursue that.
Wow.
Walk us through. This has been kind of a little bit of a downer conversation, and we don't want to leave our viewers or our listeners feeling like, there's no hope out there for families who want to go through the adoption process and maybe haven't started the process because they're just jumping in. What are the first things they need to do to make sure they are protecting themselves and their families through this process so they can hopefully end up with a positive, happy outcome?
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, almost all of the cases are positive, happy outcomes, very important. And it's not that hard to protect yourself. So that's the really good news. The key thing is just working with a team of experienced adoption professionals, it's really pretty easy to figure out when somebody's scamming versus when they're sincere in their desire to place. So if you're working with, whether it be a consultant, an agency, an attorney, all of the above, it's always a good idea to have sort of a robust team. They're going to raise the red flags and say, this isn't real, or you should not match with this case, or this is time to cut your losses and pull out. It's not that hard to figure out. So if they have a good team in place, it's very unlikely that they're going to fall victim to something like this.
How long does it typically take for a family to match with a birth mother?
That depends on so many different factors. And one of the key groups of them is how open and how flexible they are in terms of the baby that they're open to adopting, whether that has to do with the birth mom's social and medical history, the budget that they have, the level of openness they're comfortable with, the race that they're open to. So all those factors come into play, how old they are, do they have other children, all those things. Most of our clients, once they're out there ready to adopt within a year. There are some people who adopt very quickly in a few weeks. There are some people who wait longer than that. So it just depends on so many different factors and when that right expectant mom just shows up, which, you just never know when that's going to be.
How much does it cost to adopt, and where does that money go?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it is not inexpensive. Again, when we're talking about private domestic adoption, if you adopt through foster care, that's free or virtually free, and there are financial benefits that come along with that. But doing a private domestic adoption, you do have, legal fees, you have court reporting fees, court filing fees, agency overhead, you have social worker time taking the expectant mom to the doctor, you have the expectant mom's pregnancy related expenses, you have searching for birth fathers, right? Sometimes, depending on the situation, that could be sending a certified letter. Sometimes it means hiring a private investigator, right? So you have all these different expenses that go into the bucket. So it ranges significantly. There are some agencies out there that have sliding scales based on income and so on, and they can be relatively inexpensive, maybe low 30,000, something like that. And you can have cases up to 60,000, just depending on all the different factors. There is, however, a more than $15,000 tax credit, which is dollar for dollar tax credit, much more valuable than a deduction. So if people qualify for that, they would ultimately get that money back, but they do need to come up with it up front.
It kind of gives you an idea, though. I mean, that range of 30 to 60 gives you a range of how much a scammer could actually get, because these families are prepared to pay that.
Mm-hmm.
For a real adoption, right? So scammers would know that these are families with money set aside, ready to go. They've been saving for this really important step in their family's future.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Well, I mean, I love the topic, adoption, but unfortunately it's that sinister side where people are out there taking advantage. And that's why we're doing this podcast. Hopefully, kind of alert people that this does happen, and to be on the lookout. Hey, Nicole, if people want to find out more about you or your organization, where can they find you? Websites or anything like that?
Yeah, they can check out Adopting the Podcast on adopting.com, or they can find me directly at theadoptionconsultancy.com.
How long have you been doing this adoption?
Just about 20 years, 19 years now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. Wow. You are an expert then. Hey, listen, thanks so much for being on the On Your Side podcast. We really appreciate it. It was a good conversation, and I know very educational for a lot of our listeners out there. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I hope you feel better soon.
I do too. Thank you. The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton, and I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can. Send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock. And every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.